Today on the show, we're selecting our Kyber crystals, partying with Rocky, falling in love with AI, and saving humanity, and so much more. Because today, we're talking about everything that isn't Dune.
This is where we hard pivot and we just start talking about everything else. For the last 4 years, We've been talking about Dune.
Right. Blink and you might miss it, but we changed the title of the podcast.
Look again. Gom Jabbar, something else than it was. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV.
Love it.
Except for today.
None of that applies to today.
None of that applies. My name is Leo.
My name's Abu.
Oh, and today on the show, we polled you. We asked patrons. We were like, yo, what do you want us to talk about? We're a Dune podcast. What do you want us to talk about? And so many people are like, something that's not Dune, please.
Amazing. This was actually, we presented, I think, 6 options to our patrons. Like, here are some ideas we're throwing around. Which one of these would you love to hear? And today's episode, a whole episode about the sci-fi that we love that isn't Dune, was the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Now, for housekeeping quickly, spoiler warning, nothing. We're not talking about Dune.
Yeah, we're not talking about Dune. So no spoilers about Dune. We aren't talking about other properties.
Yeah.
So
we're going to do our best.
I don't know. Proceed with caution, I guess. Yeah, Dumbledore kills Snape. Who knows?
Yeah.
But no spoilers about Dune specifically today. We're just going to be gushing about other science fiction.
That's true.
A quick shout out at the top, of course, to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons. As always, Case Aiken, Daniel Dion, Roman Caballo, Jonathan Lambert, and C.R. Spruill. My goodness. Thank you so much for your support. And our gratitude, of course, extends to all of our patrons and listeners who tune in every single week and make the show possible. Thank you so much.
Indeed. So let's talk about today's episode. Basically, we're going to start by sharing 2 science fiction movies that we love.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll talk about 2 of our favorite science fiction TV shows.
Okay,
it's also very
a
fun.
theme.
Yeah, it's things that you look at. Yeah. Finally, we'll shout out some of our favorite science fiction books. Man, it was so tempting to just list Dune for all of these categories. But before we get into all of that, we're going to take a quick break. Listener, don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're talking science fiction movies.
Welcome back, folks. Let's get into our first category today. We'll each be sharing 2 science fiction movies that we absolutely love.
Yeah.
Leo, how about you kick it off for us? What was your first pick?
Well, my first pick was Andy Weir, and specifically The Martian. Andy Weir is one of my favorite authors. I love his writings. Like many people, I was introduced to his writings with The Martian, which, if I recall correctly, was his first book.
Wow.
Which is just upsetting. Like, how do you hit the ground running that fast? It's unreal. And if you haven't seen it, it's basically a 2015 movie. It's about poop potatoes on Mars. It's the best way to summarize that movie. Now, I loved The Martian because The Martian's about Watney, right? This character, Watney, just having to solve problems using the force of his intellect, right? Like his mind, it's a puzzle he has to solve. I love it. And in many ways, I think it's similar to Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, right? It's just smart people being relied upon for being smart, and kind of, it's a life or death, but you survive by being smart. And I think that's so fun. Now, I loved the movie, so I sought out basically Weir's other books, and sure enough, I enjoyed them all. He's actually the author that introduced me to like proper hard science fiction, which is a little bit debatable because he's not the hardest of hard science fiction writers, but I very much I'm the kind of person who gets distracted by like the soft magic systems and soft
Mm-hmm.
like science things. I think you chose Star Wars for one of your categories, and using Star Wars, I was always curious. Like, you have all these fucking dope force powers.
Right.
Use them in battle. Like, what what are you doing? Or same thing with like Harry Potter. Like, can you Leviosa someone into space? Can you just be like Leviosa, woo, and they're gone? I don't know.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm that annoying person who keeps getting distracted by that stuff. I'm like,
Fair.
I wonder if you could do that. Could you Accio someone through Earth? Why not? Right? I haven't gotten an answer yet. But taking a step back, I love The Martian. And the reason I chose The Martian is it's a story that shows people a new way to resolve problems, right? Like Star Trek shows us a world in which diplomacy is preferable to outright violence as the first solution, right? They're always like trying to find a solution to these problems through getting to know an unknown culture and that sort of thing. The Martian is like, here's a problem that you can only solve by being smart. And it's almost like the Sherlock Holmes books, where I feel like as a young person, you read the book or you watch the movie or whatever, and you go, hell yeah, I'm cheering for this person because they're so smart and clever and cool, which is awesome. Being a nerd is fucking great. And I like movies that put that on a pedestal.
I mean, there is a term for this. It's called competency porn.
Competency porn. What a good term. Oh my
Right.
God.
It's this idea that like it is fun and enjoyable to watch smart, capable, strong, intelligent, decisive people be smart, capable, strong, and decisive in a story.
I mean, that's a good point. I enjoy watching, I don't know if you go on like YouTube and those rabbit holes of like metalworking or like people cleaning things or painters, art restoration. It's just so fun to watch someone be good at something. And I think we see lots of like John Wick movies where the thing that the person's good at is like blowing shit up or killing people. It's cool to see a movie where the thing that someone's good at is just being a problem solver. Also because Andy Weir tries his best, sometimes more successfully than other times, to use accurate science in his books. I think stories like The Martian can also be a jumping off point for people to be interested in botany, which is fucking cool. It's cool to like have that as a possible result of watching that movie, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'll also point out, I half read the prompt and I had already chosen Project Hail Mary, which is not yet a movie, but it's being made into a movie now, apparently starring Ryan Gosling. So
okay,
very exciting to see Ken himself from the Barbie movie in space solving problems.
Right.
And I also wanted to shout out Artemis, the book, has its rights for a film also out, TBD on what's going to happen with that. But Artemis is about literally the daughter of a Muslim welder on the moon in this big moon city.
Yeah.
And it's fucking rad. It's such a good time. So I'm really hoping that we see that as well. Anyway, wrapping up, my first pick was The Martian, Andy Weir. I love his books. Love that branch of sci-fi. It's very, very cool.
Nice.
So that's me. What about you? What's your first pick?
So my first pick was very easy, and it's also a very basic answer.
Yeah.
Star Wars. I have a lot of nostalgia for Star Wars because I grew up with it. In particular, I grew up with the prequels, which might be a bit controversial for folks who loved the originals. But this also leads to my scorching hot take, I'm told, that Revenge of the Sith is the best Star Wars movie. It's the one that I've watched easily over a dozen times. It's my comfort movie that I come back to time and time again. I can quote entire scenes of that movie from memory. I love it, despite its flaws. Despite its many flaws, which I will admit exist.
Is that the one
to
with
me,
General
it is
Grievous?
Yes, it's the one with General Grievous. It's the one with, now the fun begins. Do it. Unlimited power. I would wager Yoda jumping around against Palpatine. I would wager that easily a majority of Star Wars memes that you see out there come from Revenge of the Sith. It's just such a memeable movie. I love Revenge of the Sith. Frankly, I enjoy the prequels as well, even though episodes 1 and 2 are kind of trash. And if you're actually curious about what my ranking at the moment is for Star Wars, it's always in flux. It's always fluid, moving up and down. But if you're curious about my ranking, hit me up in Discord and I'll share. I also wanted to say that beyond the movies, I have really been enjoying the Disney Plus series. Mandalorian has been such a blast. I've even enjoyed some of the more middling stuff. Book of Boba was just all right, but there was some fun stuff in there. Obi-Wan didn't quite live up to its potential, but my goodness, we got some incredible scenes in there with Darth Vader. Andor, I think, is like a true masterpiece and maybe the best Star Wars property we've gotten in like 20 fucking years. I will take the good with the bad. I love Star Wars. Give me more Star Wars. I've been really enjoying the Disney Plus series. As far as books go, I have sort of dipped my toes into the High Republic novels, but I keep bouncing off of them. They haven't really grabbed me, but maybe one of our listeners who's a big High Republic fan can help me change my mind and recommend where I should try to jump back into the series. I also wanted to share very quickly that last year I went to Galaxy's Edge in Disney World, Florida,
Disney World.
One of those, Disney World, Florida. I went to Galaxy's Edge, which is like the Star Wars part of it. And I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. Like, I've never felt more like a kid in a candy shop. Like, I spent an embarrassing amount of money.
Yeah.
I built my own lightsaber. I'd love for you, dear listener, to email us and guess what color lightsaber I picked. The options were red, blue, green, purple. I will say, for anyone who's kind of on the fence, like, should I go to Galaxy's Edge? Is it too corporate and weird and dystopian and Disney? Is it weird? Are there Disney adults everywhere? Yes, there are Disney adults everywhere, but you can ignore them. I will say I had the same fears going in. I was like, I'm not like a theme park person. This is just going to be like weird and cheesy and people are going to constantly try to sell me stuff. I was genuinely swept up in the magic.
Nice.
Like as a 30-year-old, I walked in and was just like really emotional and tearing up at being in Galaxy's Edge and witnessing the Millennium Falcon and getting to fly the Millennium Falcon on one of the rides and stuff. Super fun. I highly recommend that Star Wars fans of all ages, whether you're a kid, whether you have kids, whether you're a kid at heart, but you're actually older, go to Galaxy's Edge if you have the opportunity. I promise you'll enjoy it. It's not as corporate and weird and Disney as you might think.
Pretty good.
Lastly, just to wrap up my Star Wars thoughts here, I wanted to call out something I find super silly about internet and fandom culture. There's a big subsect of Dune fans and Star Wars fans that love to pit both of these properties against each other. To be clear, I think it's childish. I think it robs both fandoms of the joy that these two universes bring. And in general, just speaking of internet fandom culture, this idea that we need to pit two properties against each other and one has to be better than the other, or one has to be more intelligent or have more mass appeal or make more billions of dollars. These are all like pointless metrics. If it brings you joy, it's a beautiful thing. And it's such a silly thing to waste your energy on, to try and pit something you love against something someone else loves. Yes, was George Lucas inspired by Dune? Yeah, of course he was. Dune is all over Star Wars.
Yeah.
But Dune is also all over, literally, thousands of other stories in the last 50 years. Since Dune fucking came out, it has been part of the DNA of the science fiction conversation in our art and culture.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do a little mini book club on Foundation. Reading Foundation right now, Dune is not in a void.
Right. All right, what's your second movie pick? Favorite sci-fi movie?
Oh, gosh. It's Dune 1 and Dune 2. I love them so much. No, my second pick is Children of Men. So
fucking good.
God, it's so good. And this was hard. It's hard to boil down all of the sci-fi movies that I love. But I do want to talk about Children of Men because I feel as though it has been somewhat forgotten by like the zeitgeist of today. Like I just don't hear it talked about very often.
Right. No, you're right. Totally.
Which is unfortunate because it's a fucking masterpiece. It's so good. It's Alfonso Cuarón,
Yeah.
and he's incredible. If you haven't seen Children of Men, it's long as fuck. It's super beautifully shot. I mean, the cinematography of the whole movie's incredible. And it's this deeply, deeply human story, kind of exploring the apocalyptic what if, and starring Clive Owen, who's an actor that I feel like I don't see very often, but I really
Hasn't
love
been
his
around
work.
in like 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was in like a dumb movie called what was it? It was Clive Owen. It was so stupid. I don't know if anybody. Oh, he's been in movies. Oh,
He's been doing stuff. Maybe just not in our
no,
circles.
4 years. I'm not seeing anything in the last 4 years. Oh, wait, no, he is acting.
Okay.
Okay.
Good for him. Good job, Mr. Owen.
Good job. Also, Children of Men 7.9 on IMDb is fucking
Wrong.
a
That's
criminal.
so wrong.
Oh, that's awful. Anyway, broadly, like in Children of Men, the world building is so it's fucking awesome. I mean, it's just great world building.
Mm-hmm.
At no point did I feel like I was in like on a sound stage, or I felt like it just feels like you're immersed in that world the whole time. The screenplay is super dynamic, right? Like there's these long stretched out quiet bits. I love him sitting with Jasper and them just smoking weed and like talking about stuff. Like that's such a great scene. But then naturally there's also these moments that are the most tense thing that you've seen in years. There's also there's this one shot sequence which is amazing. They had to like engineer a car in order to allow the seats to like move. Incredible. It's like 6 minutes long. It's so awesome. I'll also point out The Last of Us, which is one of my favorite games of all time, is heavily influenced by Children of Men. And I actually found a quote. Venture Beat reported, Neil Druckmann, quote, saw Children of Men, and he walked out of the theater wondering why games didn't tell intimate stories like this one. You could tell we drew a lot of inspiration for The Last of Us from Children of Men, Druckmann said. End quote. So yeah, I'm like, oh shit, cool. Glad to know it wasn't just me on my like imaginative, red strings on the cork board trying to create connections that don't exist. Druckmann's like, oh yeah, Last of Us, Children of Men. Like there's the connection.
Amazing. Yeah.
So anyway, in summary, second pick, Children of Men. It's gritty, it's meditative, it's immersive, it's beautifully, beautifully shot. And I still think about it pretty regularly. The song Ruby Tuesday, Goodbye Ruby Tuesday, is still it will never be the same for me after watching Children of Men.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my second pick.
Great pick. I haven't revisited that movie in over 10 years, and now I really want to. It is truly a masterpiece. 7.9 on IMDb is fucking criminal.
That's wrong. It's all subjective. That's objectively wrong.
Yeah.
Abu, what's your second science fiction movie pick?
All right. My second pick is going to be the movie Her.
Oh.
Directed by Spike Jonze, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson and Amy Adams, among others. My goodness. I remember just absolutely falling in love with this movie like a decade ago when it first came out, when I watched it. And while I was writing this script last week, I was like, well, am I just sort of nostalgic about that time 10 years ago when I was younger, different point in life, blah, blah, blah. And maybe I don't want to claim that I love this movie if all I really feel is nostalgia about it. So I rewatched it this week, and my fucking God, it is just as good, if not better, than I remember from 10 years ago when it came out. What a perfect movie. Everything. Just everything about it. Set design, costumes, the heartfelt writing, the incredible acting by Joaquin Phoenix. My
He's
God.
so good.
Scarlett Johansson's voice, the connection they have without ever actually being on screen together, in the same room together.
Yeah.
Electric. So good. And I will say, somehow, like 10 years later, somehow this movie hit me even harder now than it did when I was younger and in a completely different place in life.
Yeah.
Couple of quick things I want to call out. I love the visual language of the film and the colors that they chose. This like color palette. It's this very muted, paintbrushy, pastel aesthetic in everything. Like Joaquin Phoenix's wardrobe is these like soft beige sweaters and stuff, orange pants, you know. There's all of this low-key sci-fi tech spread throughout the
Yeah.
film that's
Very
mostly just
background.
in the background.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's just people using it or like hologram signboards as Joaquin Phoenix is walking by. I love that. I love when the sci-fi takes a back seat.
Yeah, for
As
sure.
big of a science fiction fan as I am almost turned off when the whole premise of the sci-fi story I'm reading is the sci-fi and it keeps
Right.
shoving the sci-fi in my face. So I loved that in Her, it is a sci-fi film and all of that tech and all of that futurism is super muted and in the background.
Yeah.
And at its core, to be honest, it is a story. The plot itself, like, literally centers around a new piece of AI technology, right? Scarlett Johansson, the AI, your assistant who you fall in love with.
Yeah.
But it is not a story about AI and technology. It is still a story at its core about love and heartbreak and grief and loss and all of the messy human emotions that intersect with the technology that we use. And I think that's where the magic of science fiction is found. Ah, such a beautiful movie. I could go on and on about this, but in summary, I just want to say this movie fucking holds up.
Uh-huh.
And if anything, is maybe even more relevant today than it was 10 years ago, because now we live in a world with ChatGPT and
Yeah.
AI chatbots that you can have romantic entanglements with.
There are you can buy like services where you get like a chatbot partner. It's wild.
Right. So that's my second pick, Her. Beautiful movie. I loved it.
Yeah.
Today as much as I loved it 10 years ago, and everyone should watch it. All right, Leo, let's move on to our next category, TV shows.
Yeah.
Kick it off for us. Your first pick.
First pick is, well, listen, I'm going to paint the picture for you, okay? This is a mystery, and
Okay.
not all is as it seems
Mm.
as you watch. It's got some bold genre settings. You like cowboys, you like stirrups, you like wrestling in the dust,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Sir Anthony Hopkins
Okay.
doing fucking anything.
Planet of the Apes.
Barbie movie. No, Westworld. Westworld has got it all. And I will clarify, I very much enjoyed Westworld. The later seasons are fine. The first season was so magical. And maybe it was just like watching it at the time. I don't know. I haven't like rewatched the whole first season. But as I was thinking about it, and I have revisited specific scenes in the last few weeks, it was so good. Like, it was so fantastic. I'm going to say something quickly that is kind of a spoiler for the first season. So legitimately, if you have not watched Westworld, go watch it and skip ahead like 30 seconds just to avoid what I'm about to say, because it is kind of impactful to whether or not you'll enjoy it. Okay, that's the warning. 3, 2, 1. The fact that the story is completely out of order chronologically was such a fucking good reveal. Was so satisfying. Man in the Black Hat, that whole shit. Oh my God. And it made the future season so much more fun to watch because you're like, am I fucking being gaslit like right now? Like, what's happening?
Right.
So good. Also, every character felt very deep, which was really wonderful.
Yes.
Thematically, I just loved the show. It worked on a lot of levels. It examines what it means to be human, which I think is a hallmark of the sci-fi genre. It did so in a way that felt really fresh, right? Like the idea of like, at what point does a robot become human is just a question that we've seen examined, 1,000 times, and yet it still felt original, which was very cool. The characters all had depth. It's really wonderful to start piecing together people's motivations. And also there's a lot of like moral grayness. At the beginning of the show, you're kind of rooting for specific individuals that later on you go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be rooting for this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sir Anthony Hopkins, my God. I mean, the YouTube channel, Every Frame a Painting, did basically an 8-minute video breaking down a specific scene from Westworld where he and the representative from Davos are basically at lunch. And it's just this 7 seconds of him reacting to something that was said it gives me chills. And I go back to that video as an actor. I go back to that video like, I don't know, once every 2 months. It's like, it's just excellent. He is such a good actor. He's excellent in the show. Loved it.
Yeah.
Westworld is my first pick.
So good. Westworld was it falls in that category of shows that felt like you had to get your friends together
Yes. Oh, yes.
every
Yeah.
week and like order food, make popcorn, whatever, and watch it together. Because if you didn't, you were going to show up at the office the next day and be the one fucking loser out of the loop.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think like really Game of Thrones is the only other show in my life where every week I would gather with friends to sit down and watch it live as it came on television. Westworld
Yeah, for
season 1
sure.
in particular was similar for me. And I loved it.
It's one of those shows for sure that I think justifies the like weekly format because you
Yeah.
just had so much time to think about the reveal of the last episode and to think about like, oh my God, what does that mean for this next episode? Like, what's going to happen? So much fun. And you're right. Even if you weren't like, I don't think I ever did a like watch party, but I definitely felt pressure to watch it on like Sunday night or whenever it happened because the next day at work, everyone was going to be like, oh my fucking God, did you give all of this stuff? And that was always so much fun to participate in as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent
Absolutely.
stuff. Also, Evan Rachel Wood. Is that her name?
So good.
Evan Rachel Wood, fantastic in her role. Love her. Anyway.
I mean, this whole cast belongs in a Red Dead Redemption movie adaptation.
Oh, fuck yes. Just don't
You
even
know?
address the fact that it's the exact same cast.
Right.
Just get them all back together. Get the band back together for sure. Great suggestion. Oh my God. Okay, well, that was my first pick. What is your first sci-fi television pick?
All right. My pick is Black Mirror. This was easy.
Amazing.
I didn't have
Yeah.
to think twice about it.
Yeah.
I love smart and dystopian sci-fi.
Yeah.
That is how you get Abu Zafar fucking invested in your story.
Yeah.
Black Mirror has both of these in spades across its, I think now 6 whole seasons. As much as I love a hologram and a laser gun going pew pew and space battles, love me all of the high tech Star Trekkiness of science fiction, of course, but it's the type of sci-fi where the tech takes a back seat, much like Her, like I was saying earlier, that really grabs me. And I really do think, like, just in general, sci-fi is at its most powerful when the story digs into how humanity and society and the forces of nature react and collide with that tech or with scientific breakthroughs. A lot of science fiction is about that, but I think where science fiction can falter is when the tech becomes the story rather
Right.
than how humanity and aliens and nature collide with it. Some quick shout outs I want to do for some Black Mirror episodes that I love. The caveat here is that it has been a very long time since I've watched any of these. So all I can really state is like the key emotion I remember feeling. I was going to say I'm going to shout these out in no particular order, but I'm going to immediately break my rule. This first one is my number one pick, actually. San Junipero. Absolute,
Yeah.
it gutted me and is my favorite episode of Black Mirror. So shouts out to that one. The rest of these are out of order, but shouts to Be Right Back, which haunts me to this day in how it tackled grief in a way that few shows ever have. I'll never think about dating the same way again after having seen Hang the DJ. What a beautiful episode. Shut Up and Dance and Nosedive is horrifying stuff, makes me afraid of everything about the internet and online culture, and shows the ways in which it can go to its extremes and go horribly wrong.
Too close to home. All of them. Literally,
All of them.
That was my experience of Black Mirror is like, oh, I have new fears and anxieties that I did not have prior to like 20 minutes
Yep.
ago. Thank you, I guess. But it is helpful to be skeptical and to be cautious. And man, they do a good job of,
Yep.
yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, I love almost every single episode. Of course, across 6 seasons, you're going to have some duds here and there. Certainly some duds exist. But for the most part, Black Mirror, I think, is one of the smartest sci-fi shows out there right now. And I think I saw a rumor recently that a new season is in production. And I can't wait.
Yeah, Black Mirror. I feel like we couldn't do this episode and not talk about Black Mirror briefly, because for sure, I think in the world of sci-fi, it's definitely carved out its own little niche of short story format, like nightmare creation.
Yeah,
I think about
totally.
that. I think about that the VR horror game one, where it's like a VR horror game, but they're
Yeah.
like, "Be careful, it's really scary." He's like, "I've got this," and then it is really scary, and then he's not sure if he's still in it or not, and then you find out at the end stuff has happened. But very, very cool, and also feels very relevant to today with like the Apple Vision Pro and these like new spatial computers and things that once you put them on, they're showing you reality, but are they showing you reality? Who's to
Right.
say? Who
Right.
knows? You know?
So good. Yeah, and so relevant. You watch Black Mirror and you are suddenly like, I wasn't thinking of that before, but now I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay, what about you? TV show pick number 2.
Oh, okay. So again, so many I'd love to shout out, but I was thinking about what shows don't get enough appreciation, and
Mm-hmm.
one that came to mind was The Midnight Gospel. Did you see this show? Did you watch it?
I am Googling it as we speak.
So, okay, yeah. The Midnight Gospel is a single season. It's 8 episodes. It's on Netflix. It's very fucking strange. A little hard to
Ooh.
recommend to people. I actually want to just read you the Wikipedia summary because it is a hard concept to wrap your head around.
Okay.
Quote, "The Midnight Gospel revolves around a space caster named Clancy Gilroy who lives on the Chromatic Ribbon, a membranous tape-like planet situated in the middle of a colorful void where simulation farmers use powerful bioorganic computers to simulate a variety of universes from which they harvest natural resources and new technology. Each episode revolves around Clancy's travels through planets within the simulator, with the beings inhabiting these worlds as the guests he interviews for his Spacecast, which is a podcast. These interviews are based on actual interviews with real audio sampled from Trussell's podcast, The Duncan Trussell Family Hour. The episodes typically end with an apocalyptic event from which Clancy barely manages to escape." End
Mm.
quote.
Wow.
So in kind of more common parlance, that's Duncan Trussell, the kind of comedian personality out there, has a podcast. He plays Clancy, who has a space podcast, and he goes to these apocalyptic scenarios and interviews individuals during these apocalypses. And it's all set in this like very weird tone. I think the first episode he's interviewing the quote unquote president of the US, but it's just this like a friend of his or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's during a zombie apocalypse, but they're conversations about like drugs and like what drugs are good drugs and like how do you define a good drug? And, you know, obviously there's all these like laws about that, but so many of those are based in racism and like all this shit from the 70s and Nixon and all that, you know, that's their conversation as they're like fighting zombies. It's a very strange show. Super, super weird. But the topics range from, drugs, from sex and meditation practice, but most impactfully, it talks about death and loss in a way that I had never heard before. And I'm going to share something about the last episode, which it's not necessarily a narrative show, right? It is, you're
Right.
watching for the fun of hearing two people talk about something that maybe you haven't heard talked about before in a way that you haven't heard it talked about.
Yeah.
But the final episode is really remarkable for a reason. If you are going to go watch it, I'm going to say something now you probably should just skip. So again, I'm going to give you a 30-second. I'll do this in 30 seconds and I'll count you down. Skip ahead to avoid what I'm about to say. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Final episode. He's interviewing his mother who has terminal stage 4 cancer and she knows she's going to die. And they talk about her impending death. And he talks about, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to be without you. And she's like, it's okay. You know, we're just dealing with stuff. Unbelievable. That episode was a catalyst that made me re-examine how I live life with the people who matter to me. It is unreal how, well, first of all, how hard I cried during that episode, but also just how this goofy, surreal, stupid sci-fi show made me actually change the way that I live my life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I just hearing you describe that, just makes me feel things already. Wow. Jesus.
It's, and again, you will not be ready for it because the first 7 episodes are just such fucking lunacy. So
Yeah.
I recommend it. It's each episode is like 25 minutes long. You can get through it literally in like 1 or 2 sittings. But yeah, The Midnight Gospel is my second pick. Also, it's funny that it is basically podcasting. So
Right.
felt
Right.
appropriate.
Yeah, that completely flew under my radar. I had never heard of this before.
I think of my friend group, I only know like 2 or 3 people who've seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. The visuals are very striking, very psychedelic, very neons, pinks, purples.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's very rad. It's very psychedelic.
Amazing.
That's my second pick. What about you, Abu? What's your second sci-fi TV pick?
I don't even truly know where to begin with my second pick because it's Cowboy Bebop. Like, I don't know
Yes.
what I could say that hasn't already been said better by countless people.
Yeah, the show's okay. That's so good.
Oh, Cowboy Bebop. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm a podcaster, and so I tend to throw words like iconic and masterpiece around like I'm at a dodgeball game, but like genuinely, Cowboy Bebop is the very definition of those words.
Yeah.
Just the vibes alone of this show go harder than basically any other TV show I've ever consumed in my life. And then you add in the stunning, iconic, grungy sci-fi visuals of the show, the iconic soundtrack, a heartbreaking story that just gutted me inside and out, the pitch perfect voice acting, whether you watch it in the original Japanese or you watch the English dub, the incredibly memorable characters that have gone on to become just pop culture icons. I mean, you combine all of that together and you've got truly a once in a generation work of art. And it sits in a very special place for me because I watched it during just like a really rough time in life for me during college. I was feeling, aimless and depressed and various other things. And watching Cowboy Bebop was truly transformative.
Mm.
Watching Spike Spiegel was truly transformative. I mean, his iconic whatever happens, happens, the way he delivers that, the whole idea behind that, genuinely and unironically played a role in getting me through some of the toughest years I had in college and afterwards. So Cowboy Bebop will always have a place in my heart, and nothing will ever replace it. I love it so much. I recommend anyone and everyone watch it. I think even people, if you're somebody who's like, ew, anime, I don't watch anime, what is this? Cowboy Bebop transcends any definition of like genre, category, whatever. Like, I have friends who will never come within 50 yards of anything anime who have watched Cowboy Bebop and wept. So truly, I think the show is for anyone and everyone out there who might be interested. I also quickly just want to shout out my boy Ein, who is the best boy in all of pop culture, and I will not be taking any feedback on that because I know I'm absolutely right. Don't tell me about your other dogs who might be better. Ein is the best dog in pop culture. Hands down.
Yeah, whenever I see someone who's in their like 30s and they have a corgi, I'm like 60% chance, 70% chance you watched Cowboy Bebop and you obtained the same obsession that many of us did. Also, Steve Bloom like credits that show as the one that like really taught him the ins and outs of acting. And Steve Bloom's the voice of Spike Spiegel. Of course, goes on to be one of the most prolific and is still one of the most prolific voice actors in the industry. And he had a career before that too, but still, my God, him as Spike Spiegel will just like sit in my head forever. It's so good.
Oh, I love it so much. Okay, that's movies and television, Leo. We still have to talk about books.
Yeah. Heard of those?
Before we ever heard of them. Ink on page.
Oh, archaic.
Before we get into our sci-fi book discussion, though, there's a lot of ground to cover here. Let's take a quick breather, folks. But don't go anywhere when we come back. We're talking about our favorite sci-fi books and also shouting out some honorable mentions that we didn't have time to get into today. All of that after the break.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Yeah, let's talk sci-fi books. And I'll start with my first pick.
Mm-hmm.
My first pick was Ted Chiang. And I'll narrow this pick to Exhalation, the
Love Exhalation.
short story collection. I have it on the bookshelf right there. I was encouraged by a friend to read Exhalation. Stories of Your Life is the short story that Arrival was based on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've seen Villeneuve's movies, you've seen a story that he came up with that Ted Chiang wrote. And the 9 stories gathered within Exhalation are so shockingly different. Like just within this one short story collection, we get a time-traveling merchant. We get self-studying robots who survived the apocalypse and, of course, wonder at their origins, which have been lost to data corruption. A what if where young Earth creationism is accurate, like whereas all of the data points toward young Earth creationism and what would happen except this is not the Earth that God made. And of course, finally, a story that deeply, deeply unsettled my perception of reality, where there's like truth and documentation. And of course, we've talked about in this podcast skepticism of historians who are wont to write whatever they write. But there is also just like words and like how you remember things is really challenged by one of the stories. Do you remember the one that I'm talking about? It's like the truth of feeling and the fact of something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't remember that one. I remember the Baghdad one. I remember there's a big one in the middle that goes on really long
For fucking
about
ever. Yeah.
the woman who works in that corporation, but I
That's
can't
the
remember
life
what the
cycle of
corporation
software
was.
objects was that one because it's like
Yes,
120 pages long and it's my least favorite story in
it
the
is
collection.
the worst one. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but
Yeah.
still great. And I think, like to your point, the breadth of imagination is kind of astounding. You know, it's 9 short stories that are so dramatically unique that you're like, one person came up with this and then
Yeah.
published it all in
Yeah.
one book altogether.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll spend a lifetime not coming up with 9 wildly creative things of this nature.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I loved so much about Exhalation. Like every time you get to another story, like you're in for a completely wild and different ride.
Yeah. It's very true. And actually, just to shout out another story that's not in this collection, but I thought was one of the coolest short stories I've ever read, period, was his story Tower of Babylon, which basically permits ancient Hebrew cosmology as true. So we are underneath the vault of heaven that the great flood was like released from. And they're building the Tower of Babylon to reach heaven, of course, and they succeed. It's so fucking weird. They climb above the sun. They're like climbing up the tower and they're like, oh, look, there's the sun that we're like now above because it's all true. And the ending is goddamn incredible. So yes, Ted Chiang, the human man who writes books, my favorite sci-fi book. But pretty much all of his stories I really enjoy.
Love it. Yeah, I loved Exhalation. Honestly, I have been wondering if I should revisit it. I feel like I rushed through it the first time I read it, and I genuinely didn't give these stories the
Yeah.
time they deserved, and I didn't process them enough. So maybe it's time I revisit.
So that's my first pick, basically Ted Chiang stories. What about you? What's your first sci-fi book or like book series?
I'm going to pull a classic Leo Wiggins here.
Yeah.
I'm going to squeeze 3 answers into my one pick.
19 books.
But they all kind of fall into the same category of just iconic dystopian literature that I read in AP English. So my picks are 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451. And for folks who have read those stories, it probably makes sense why I categorized all of those together. We've established thus far in the conversation on this episode that I'm a sucker for smart and dystopian sci-fi. That's how you get your claws in me. And truly, nobody does it better than these classics. These are the 3 books that, to me, define smart dystopian sci-fi. They're timeless. The ideas that they present, honestly, feel like they're slowly coming true and have come true in haunting ways, from the surveillance state of 1984 to the book bans and book burnings of Fahrenheit 451 to the technological and biological class divides that are at the center of Brave New World. all of that in some way, shape, or form in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years feels like has come to be reality, which
Mm.
is scary to think. And honestly, I don't have much more to say about these books outside of like they're iconic, they're timeless, they're must reads for any sci-fi or any just book fan out there. They truly, in my mind, establish sort of this whole brand of science fiction, this genre, this idea of like smart and deeply dystopian futures.
Hmm.
And I love them. There's a reason they're taught in AP English classes around the country. And it's truly been a while. Some of these I haven't revisited since AP English in high school, but I definitely need to. And I've been feeling the urge to pick them back up again since writing this script.
Fun fact: haven't read any of them. Well, I don't know what happened. I didn't read any books. I mean, I only read like fantasy books for fun. My high school didn't have us read anything. Last week, I read Jekyll and Hyde for the first time.
Tale of Two Cities.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I don't think I read it.
My God. Catcher in the Rye. I mean, there's so many books that I just like had to read in English class.
Yeah, Mice and Men. I read this.
Mice
I
and
read some of the
Men.
Steinbeck books. Yeah, but it's like it's funny because like I know that many people have read those books, but my schools are also weird. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
I do, but it's nice because now I get to read them for the first time. Again, I was in Scotland bragging about it, but I picked up finally a copy of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I'd never read. And fun fact, it's excellent. So it's similar. I'm like, I'm going to read.
You heard it here
1984.
first.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Breaking news. This 84-page story is pretty sweet. But that's going to be me. I'm going to read like 1984 and I'm going to go, oh my God, guys. Have you
heard of this?
You heard this great book? Everyone's like, yes, you're so late to the party.
Oh my goodness. Man, I wonder what it's like reading those books for the first time in 2024. Because you'll read them and you'll be like, what the fuck am I reading?
Yeah.
You know, like this cannot have been written 50 years ago. Wild. Yeah. Interesting. Well,
subscribe on Patreon.
And
you'll
text me your thoughts.
Ask me in Discord.
Right. Okay. Back to you. What's your second pick?
My second pick is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, iconic.
Yeah. Again, another book series that I read. This was one that I read in high school, and it was so fun, so funny. I loved that world desperately. I love the concept of we found the answer to the question of what's the meaning of life, but we don't know what the question is because the answer doesn't make any goddamn sense. You go, please give us the answer. What is the meaning of life? And the universe says 42. And you're like, what's the question of life then? And then even that like didn't really make any sense. It's so like you have to ask for more context, I guess. It's such a good story. It's such a fun story. It's so weird. It doesn't take itself super seriously. I think we in the same way that I'm like, yeah, we can't do this episode and not talk about Star Wars and Black Mirror and like these other pieces of like cornerstone sci-fi. I think Hitchhiker's Guide exists as that for many people as well. Yeah. It was one of the first like sci-fi multi-series books that I read when I was young. And I think it's important still that some books are just fucking fun, are just like a good time. They're not, scaring you. They're not like challenging deep beliefs about humanity and positing these hard to answer questions. Sometimes it's like, yeah, just don't forget your towel. Why? Because it's really useful to have a towel sometimes. And you're like, okay, that's a good point. More books should just be fun. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That's my little soapbox moment. I think Douglas Adams is an excellent, excellent writer, and his sarcastic, dry humor, the whole thing, it's delightful. So that's my pick, Hitchhiker's Guide. I think most people know all about it.
Yeah. And another story that has influenced so much of pop culture, like
totally.
The 42 has become an internet meme.
Yeah.
Literally the Ahsoka TV show series, Star Wars, has space whales.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so funny.
So it's just like everything builds off what came before. Everything's inspired.
It is more influential, I think, than even I realize at this moment. So it would be fun to go back and reread.
Yeah. It's one that I put off for a long time just because I am such a dystopian sci-fi reader that I was like, what is this like silly sci-fi? This is probably not for
Yeah.
me. And I
Yeah.
ignored it for years. Like I think I literally read Hitchhikers 2 years, 3 years ago, maybe. Like
Whoa.
it was
Wow.
a pandemic read for me.
Wow. Crazy.
And I mean, of course I absolutely loved it, but I put it off for so long because I was like, I don't know, I'm probably not going to find this funny. Like I don't like, this is not the kind of sci-fi I
Yeah.
like. I
Yeah.
like let my prejudice guide me there. And I almost missed out on one of the best sci-fi stories ever.
Wow, that's cool. I'm glad it holds up well enough that you loved it, because there's always that fear that I'm like going to go back and reread it and be like, oh, this is not as good as I thought it
No,
was.
it's great. It's great. The audiobook is also excellent because I think there's a version where Stephen Fry does the audiobook,
Oh,
and
excellent.
it's spectacular.
During his stint of doing a ton of audiobooks.
Right.
He also did
Right.
Harry Potter, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that is my second pick, Hitchhiker's Guide. What about you? What is your second sci-fi book pick?
Okay. Well, speaking of iconic science fiction stories that influenced basically everything that came after them, Foundation by Isaac Asimov.
Foundation.
Of course. I mean, Foundation, Isaac Asimov. We were just talking about it before we hit record on this episode, and you're reading it for the first time because
Yeah.
we're about to cover it on this show.
Yep.
And I mean, you're gushing about it. I'm so happy that you're gushing about it. Foundation is one of my all-time favorite series. I've read the 6 books in this series. I haven't dipped into the robots and other Asimov stuff yet, but I have read the core Foundation series. And my goodness, I mean, it's amazing. Dune and Foundation, in fact, are usually mentioned like in the same breath in similar circles.
Yeah.
And it's for very obvious reasons. Like when you read Dune, when you read Foundation, you realize how similar thematically they are. And my God, I mean, what is there to even say about Foundation? It's iconic. It's one of the most fundamental sci-fi books of all time by one of the greatest sci-fi authors of all time, like one of the fathers of modern sci-fi. I mean, it just, I think when you look into it a little bit more, what's even more astonishing is that Isaac Asimov wrote the first Foundation book in his early 20s.
What?
Yep. If you do the math from when he was born and when it was being published in the Astounding Science Fiction magazine, he was writing Foundation and getting it published in like serial short story format, one piece at a time, in a science fiction magazine in his 20s.
That's wild.
It's truly incredible. Like it makes me realize that, well, it makes me real sad about my accomplishments.
That's okay.
What's also really cool and kind of a little Easter egg connection to Dune is that the legendary editor of that magazine, John Campbell Jr., would go on to become one of Asimov's like key mentors that helped him shape his voice and style as an author. And sharp-eared listeners of this show will remember that we have talked about Mr. John Campbell Jr. before because he also worked with Frank Herbert to shape a little story called Dune, which also was released in serial format in his magazine.
Insane.
Amazing stuff.
Yo, Campbell's got his hands all over so many things.
All over, yeah. A true icon in sci-fi, like especially during like the heyday of sci-fi, you know, when we were really well, I say we like I was alive back then. Just the heyday of sci-fi when the world got like iconic stuff like Foundation. Very quickly to rattle off a couple of thoughts here because I know folks will ask, why do I love Foundation? Great writing. The political themes are amazing. The historical commentary. I love me a time skip in a story. And my God, Foundation is full of time skips. The way it plays with time and the way time is so critical to the story itself. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I will admit that I can definitely pass on the later books in the series. I like 1, 2, and 3, the original trilogy, Foundation, Second Empire, and Second I forget what they are. Oh,
Foundation,
no, Foundation, and Empire.
And then Second Foundation.
And then Second Foundation. Those 3 are perfect. My goodness, I loved them to death.
Mm-hmm.
The latter 3, which were written a long time afterward, aren't that great. And it's clear that Asimov's heart wasn't really in it. And he even admits in various interviews I've seen that he basically was told by the publisher to make them because Foundation was printing money and they wanted to keep printing money. And so they told him to write sequels.
It's rough. Don't get too popular.
And by that
folks.
time, he had written other stuff and expanded into his robot series. So he tried to then like weirdly connect the later Foundation books into his robot books and make them all one extended universe. And I think it really falters. Like, I'm not a big fan of the latter books in the series. I also know folks will ask whether we've seen the TV show. I have watched the Foundation TV show on Apple TV Plus. I really disliked season 1 because I came into it and I was like, yay, I'm getting an adaptation of one of my all-time favorite books. And the show is not an adaptation of Foundation, despite what the name may claim and despite what the characters may be named. I did watch the second season and actually enjoyed it way more. And the show truly did win me over once I was able to disconnect my assumption that this was an adaptation of the book.
Yeah.
The show like basically fails to adapt the book in every single way outside of borrowing some core ideas and some core concepts, but then doing its own fucking thing with them anyway. So why borrow them? Whatever. I could go on about that. But if you just watch Foundation and you're like, this is just a TV show and it's a good sci-fi TV show with Apple's big budget behind it, it is actually really good. And I really enjoyed the second season. So as a standalone show, love it. As an adaptation of the book, it's utter fucking garbage. So there you go.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet because I was like, oh, I want to read the book first. And now that we're finally doing this, well, I'm halfway done and we'll be exciting to watch it.
Yeah. I mean, you're at the point in the book, you've met Polly Verisov, right? Polly came in.
Yeah. He's the head priest of that.
The head priest in Anacreon, but he's actually just like an undercover guy working for Hardin.
Yeah.
And he doesn't actually believe in any of the religion stuff anyway.
Yeah. It's all bullshit. Yeah.
In the show, he is a priest who believes all in about the religion stuff.
Ew. What?
Like literally all they did was borrow the name and then make the opposite character than what he is in the book, you know? So like shit like that keeps happening in the show. And eventually I just had to be like, this is not the book, but I can enjoy it as its own show. And I did. Season 2 is actually really good as its own show. The last thing I want to remind listeners is that we are reading the book, as we've sort of hinted at many times in this discussion. You're reading it for the first time. I'm rereading it for the upteenth time. And we will be covering Foundation, the first one, in a mini 2-episode book club that will release first on Patreon for patrons, and then 3 months down the line will eventually be released on the public feed as well. So if you were interested in that series, or if you're already a big fan like myself, I encourage you to read along with us. Grab a copy.
Indeed. Especially one that smells as good as this one. I literally, this is the best old book smell book I have.
I love that old book smell.
It's so good. Also, keeping the conversation brief, but fun fact, Eleanor and I read Three Body last week. Great. Watched the first episode of the show. We're like, what the fuck is this? What do you think of the adaptation?
Well, my thoughts are very publicly and extensively available on the Science Fiction Book Club podcast, to be clear, because that's where we're reading the book chapter by chapter, book club style, and we've talked about the Netflix show over there as well. But to keep it brief, I really like the book.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect book by any means. I'm not so much a hard sci-fi fan. It gets a little too jargony with the science of it all, but then it eventually gets super cool once you get to the Sophons and the Trisolarans and stuff. The TV show is pretty middle of the road for me. I think the TV show tried its best to take the big ideas in the book and make them palatable for an audience, but I think it maybe stepped a little too far in doing so, and it lost some of the heart of the book along the way by doing that. You know, it was like, we need to make sure that like your like middle school grade teacher mom can understand this show.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the show's not really for the
said.
middle school grade school teacher mom. So maybe just like make it for the audience that it is for.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of lost their way in making it too palatable.
An example that I just wanted to call out, because I think our listeners would appreciate this sort of discourse anyway, because this is what we do. Yeah. But specifically, like Ye Wen-jae and the reporter, who ends up giving her this Silent Spring.
Yes.
The fact that in the show they it's a romantic thing. It's a sexual thing that they like hook up.
Yes.
Just totally, I'm like, okay, you are boiling this down to the point where you have now made every important person in her life someone that she's either related to or is like attracted to and sleeps with. Like,
Right.
what a weird choice to make.
Right.
And I get that it's shorthand. Like, of course, you're not going to sleep with someone that you don't trust. It's shorthand for she clearly trusts him if they're sleeping together.
Right. And
But
it
it
makes
also,
the betrayal more emotional.
yeah,
you
or
know,
whatever.
quote unquote.
But that just makes the only way you can demonstrate trust on camera whether or not they're sleeping. So then I was the whole time making jokes like every guard she meets, she's like, "You single?" Because it's like, what the fuck else are you gonna do? It's so weird. Anyway.
Yeah, and it goes against Ye's character because she's such an intellectual person. Like,
Totally.
you're telling me she can't just connect deeply with someone on an intellectual level, which she does in the
Yeah.
book many times. Like, yeah, right. She's like, yeah, they use a lot of shorthand like that in the book to try and get emotion in the Netflix adaptation,
Yeah.
to get some ideas across. And it compresses the book
Also,
a bit too much. I'm glad
justice-
you read it, though. I'm
Justice
glad
for
you read it.
Dashi. I feel like he's so much better in the book. Love
He's
that guy.
such a badass in the
He's
book.
so good. Anyway.
Okay.
is
Well, we're already
better.
sort of talking about honorable mentions. We might as well get into it.
Yeah. Lightning
We
style.
had so many things that we wanted to include in this conversation, of course, but then we'd be here for 6 hours.
Right.
So we figured, okay, let's just list some of the things that we didn't have a chance to say anything about and read them off, rattle them off rapid fire style. So, Leo, honorable mentions that you didn't have time to mention today.
Bong Joon-ho movies, The Host and Snowpiercer, both
Snowpiercer!
fucking excellent movies.
Yes.
Sci-fi, awesome. Edge of Tomorrow, I mentioned it earlier, love it, so good. Interstellar, rewatched that recently. I know you did too. Christopher Nolan at his best, where it's like a followable narrative versus fucking Tenet or whatever the fuck that was. The Matrix, it's a classic for a reason.
I mean, come
It's
on, yeah.
perfect. It's so good. And it's also awesome to rewatch with the context of the Wachowski siblings and like analogies of transgenderism and all this. Like, it's very cool to revisit. Everything Everywhere at All at Once, calling it sci-fi, possibly my favorite movie.
Goodness.
It's just
Cried so much. I couldn't stop crying in the third act.
I started crying at 40 minutes into the movie and I just cried until the end. It was, it's like, and I walked away from the movie wanting to be a better human. Like, how the fuck? How?
That's art, baby.
That's art, baby. The Iron Giant. The Iron
Never
Giant.
seen
Another. You've.
I know.
I need to
I've
stop.
I've seen, I think, the most important scene. That doesn't count, I take it. Okay.
It is another like perfect movie. It's like, it is. God, I need to stop being surprised. Once I knew you hadn't seen Mulan, I just need to be like, okay, it's a 50-50.
Right.
This classic, I would say go watch it. It's also like the director lost his wife to gun violence, like a random like gun, like,
Oh my gosh.
so the entire movie is like anti-guns and weapons and this
Wow.
robot struggling to understand its role because it is a weapon, but like, what does that mean? And it gets to have a choice. It's a fucking devastatingly beautiful movie that is so worth every praise I can lay upon it. So go watch that, Abu. And then just quick shout out for some games. The Portal series, fantastic.
Right.
Dead Space, fucking love it. I love dark, spooky space games.
Too spooky for me.
And then Outer Wilds was also a fucking excellent time loop kind of space game.
Man, I've tried Outer Wilds multiple times, and it fails to get its claws on me, not because it's not a great game.
Yeah.
But because I can just never get in the right mindset for it. I need to give it a real college try one of these days.
It's one of those games that on paper you're like, that's never going to work. Like, getting people to go through these like very obscure puzzles that are galaxy wide or solar system wide, and yet somehow it comes together. But those are my little honorable mentions. What about you? What's your
Great
list?
Okay, my honorable mentions real quick. Pacific Rim.
Sick.
I love it.
So good.
That's all I have to say about that. No, it's incredible. Pacific
Big
Rim
robots.
is amazing, underrated. And sometimes an average movie can be a spectacular movie, and that's what Pacific Rim is.
I've said this before. I think Pacific Rim did something that I wish more movies did. Big robot punches the other robot or the kaiju or whatever they're fighting, and the hand into the office, and it knocks the little Newton's cradle, the
Yes, that's right. Right.
thing. That moment, we need more of that, because it reminded you of the scale of these big robots, because it's so
Yes.
easy to like zoom too far out and just be like,
Yes.
oh, these are human-sized things fighting in a small, like a sand pit. That was so cool, and that was a very good moment for the for that.
Exactly.
That whole thing.
Godzilla vs. Kong movies. Take notes.
Yes. Oh, please. Fucking
Like,
please.
get the scale right. When the now we're just talking about Pacific Rim. When the Gypsy Danger grabs the battleship and whacks the shit out of the
Yeah.
Like, I was such a kid watching that movie, like screaming at everything happening in that movie. So good. I mean, the acting is extremely subpar, but everything else is incredible.
It is fine if I'm generous. Yeah. But excellent movie for sure.
Yeah. Idris Elba, I guess, is really spectacular.
He's great.
Canceling the apocalypse, baby. That was like my fucking mantra for like 3 whole months after watching this movie. Okay. Video game wise, honorable shout out to Mass Effect, my favorite video game series of all time. Yeah. The whole trilogy is perfection. Honestly, other sci-fi games need to get on this fucking level, because nothing as good has ever come out since, in my opinion. Lost actually almost made it to my actual pick before I swapped it out for Cowboy Bebop.
Do we call that sci-fi?
Lost is most definitely sci-fi.
Really?
Yes, it's. I mean, it's, well, it could. Yeah, I suppose you could argue, but
yeah.
It's like it established, like, Lost is in that like pantheon of television shows that like established what TV could be, how great TV could be. I mean, things like Sopranos and The Wire, I think, also sort of live up in that pantheon. Just establishing like what prestige TV and what mystery box television can and should be like.
Yeah.
Lost. I will never ever forget the night I first started watching Lost, and I knew I was all in on this show the second John Locke said, "Don't tell me what I can't fucking do." And I was like, I'm in, baby. Like, this show is incredible. And it lived up. I know people have feelings about season 6 and the ending, but
sure,
I love it.
But also, like, the slow reveal that things were not as they seemed.
Yeah.
Had me. Like, I love
Incredible.
It's again, great show for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. And the whole cast is just, you love and hate the whole cast so much. It's incredible. Another book that didn't make it on my list today, Slaughterhouse-5. I love Kurt Vonnegut. A bunch of anime that I couldn't squeeze in.
It's too long. Yeah.
Like, anime of itself could be a whole episode
Akira,
of me
Ghost
gushing.
In the Shell,
right. Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Space Dandy. Digimon, of course, is like truly formative to me.
Gundam.
Fuck Pokemon. Get out of here. No, I love Pokemon too. Gurren Lagann, like, sometimes I still whisper to myself, good. Let me see you grit those teeth. And I used to really obnoxiously tell my friends, like, you don't have to believe in yourself, believe in the me that believes in you. Pulled straight from Gurren Lagann. Like, this show defined of my life for so many years, and I loved it. Watchmen, both the graphic novel and the movie, which is controversial. A lot of people hate the movie.
Movie was fun.
I love it. It's fun. It's like very Snyder in a very Snyder way, but I think for once it actually fit, and Watchmen was fun to watch.
You're stuck in here with me. Excellent moment.
Incredible.
The owl jet shooting flamethrowers at the moment of climax.
Yes.
Awesome. No notes.
I too climax. Right. No notes.
Blue penises everywhere. Spectacular stuff.
Yeah. I will say, if you didn't like the Snyder movie and that's the reason you didn't watch the HBO show, you fucked up.
Fuck. Yeah, the HBO show is incredible.
The HBO show is easily one of the best TV shows I've watched in the last 10 years.
It's so good.
And it's like I don't know that it ever got renewed for a season 2, because it doesn't really have to. It's like a one and done. You just watch one season of it. You get a complete, near perfect story. That's so good.
I would love to go back and watch that again for the first time. Like,
truly. I mean, I cried so hard in the last episode. Incredible stuff. And finally, another show that I want to shout out, Love, Death, and Robots, which is like sort of a sci-fi short film anthology thing on
Excellent.
Netflix.
Yeah.
And my goodness. I mean, like, again, you get your duds every now and then, but this show is full of incredible creative ideas. It's like if Ted Chiang took Exhalation and turned it into a TV
Totally.
show.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to shout that out as well. That's my list.
Excellent. Nice.
And that's the sci-fi that we love. That isn't
Indeed.
Dune.
And also isn't anime.
And also is an anime. Yeah, totally.
We really couldn't talk about. I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, Paprika is basically an anime movie. Neon Genesis Evangelion was almost like my TV pick. Like that was an incredible show. There's so many that are so fucking rad. So yeah, maybe we'll have to come back and.
Right. Anime is its own beast.
Yeah, for sure it is.
All right. This was such a fun one. Thank you, patrons, for voting and giving us the opportunity to kind of flex our geekiness about things that aren't Dune. Of course, we love Dune, but sci-fi for me personally is an extremely important part of my life. And it was fun to get to geek out with you, Leo, about some of the other things we love too.
It's also a reminder, I definitely have not read enough sci-fi books. Like I was really racking my brain for sci-fi books, and I've read so much fantasy, but I really haven't read as much sci-fi as fantasy. So yeah, I'm excited. Like I feel like this episode has inspired me to like also.
Wait, what's your favorite fantasy? Top 2 fantasy picks? Go.
Oh, top 2 fantasy picks? Oh fuck, the Subtle Edge, Golden Compass, Subtle Edge, that whole that series is fucking rad.
Golden Compass, yep.
King Killer Chronicles. My God, Patrick Rothfuss.
King Killer Chronicles. Okay,
incredible. I'm looking.
Is that Name of the Wind?
Bookshelf. Yeah, Name of the Wind.
Okay, and, people keep recommending Wiseman's that to me. But,
shit. Oh yeah, if you like Harry Potter, it's basically Harry Potter with a hard magic system that they're not obnoxious about. And there's a musical performance scene that had me crying on a train in New York because I know what that feels like to be a performer, a musician, and it's like I've never heard it described so viscerally.
Wow. Okay, amazing.
I have Mistborn back there I haven't read yet.
Yeah, Brando Sando is one thing I've never dipped my toes into. And I know I will have to eventually. Someday.
There's time. Well,
all right.
Dear listeners, before we let you go, we want to remind you of some ways to support us and what we do here at Gom Jabbar. 2 best ways, as always. 1, become a patron. 2, Dune-themed shit that we made. Merch store. Those links in the show notes. That's how you do that. Check them out.
Support us. Help us keep making geeky content like this.
It's a lot of work.
And of course, my goodness, we love to hear from you. Email us, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your thoughts. Send us your questions. Send us pictures of your cute pets. Dune, not Dune, your favorite sci-fi. We want to hear it all. gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know and say hello.
Do it.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also on TikTok at Gom Jabbar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the Golden Path.